We have an extra 20 minutes if we need it for questions beyond the original 3 o'clock start time. So I think we'll have plenty of time for questions from the audience. Before we go there, though, I'd like to ask a few questions myself. Richard, I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how you go about measuring engagement on academia.edu, and in doing so, how you distinguish between really meaningful engagement, such as the discussions that you demonstrated, and distinguishing that from those who might just come and grab a bunch of papers and go away.
So the primary way that social media sites track engagement is looking at DAUs, which stands for daily active users, and MAUs, which stands for monthly active users. And that's basically the primary way. We compare our MAUs with our MAU rate, which is the MAUs divided by the total registered users with Twitter and other sites, and Facebook and Instagram. And to put things in perspective, our MAU rate, our percentage of the user base that is active at least once a month, is about the same as Twitter's.
Okay, Reese, I was wondering, when you mentioned that people were peeved that ResearchGate might go in, for example, and alter something that they've posted in some way, it wasn't clear to me exactly what was being altered. Was it a paper that had been uploaded illegally that was being deleted, or was it something else?
It was passionate discussion. It was scientific debate where people were really, really fired up about something, a paradigm topic in a field, and rather than let the argument continue on, a moderator thought, this really isn't going anywhere. I'm going to go ahead and take it down.
And Mark, just wondering, without putting you in a position to give away too much free advice, if a publisher were to hire you to advise them on how to partner with scientific collaboration networks in some meaningful way, what would your advice be?
I think it would depend on who the publisher was and sort of what scale, because clearly these are big operations, and there's a lot of publishers in the long tail. But my sense is that there's an interesting process in play at the moment in respect of STM, and I'd be a bit inclined to sort of see how that consultation plays out and where that goes, to be honest.
Okay. One more question for Richard, and then we'll go to the audience for some more questions. Assuming that your investors at some point are going to expect some return on their investment, and I believe that you have job boards as ResearchGate does, and maybe some other things up your sleeve. But I'm wondering what you might be able to tell us about any ideas you have with regard to monetization.
Yeah, it's not something we're focusing on at the moment. At the moment, we're trying to get the model right, provide the most useful tools for academics to interact and communicate and share. We do obviously have a few ideas, but that not in a form yet that we wanted to discuss them publicly.
Understood. I was interested, Reese, that you mentioned that ResearchGate was serving up ads for jobs to you that were clearly not appropriate, because I know that one of the ways they sell themselves to potential advertisers is by saying that they know so much about you, not only how you've self-identified, but what papers you're downloading, who you're collaborating with, that they can identify very precisely who you are and what your interests might be. So not getting that quite right yet, it sounds like.
I'd say a lot of that's on me. I think if I would have filled out things more thoroughly, I probably would have gotten some of those very, very senior level positions I wouldn't have been hit with.
All right. So if there are any questions from the audience now, I'll be happy to hear them.
questions. Richard Geddy, Director of Outreach Programs from STM. And it's not a question, I just wanted to make a comment on a couple of Richard's slides where he cited examples of one academic researcher, I think it was, from a Kenyan university, and a clinician also from Kenya, who said they couldn't get access to papers from journals like Nature. Those of us who were here earlier on would have heard Michael Mabe refer to a project called Research for Life, in which STM is a partner along with 4 United Nations agencies, 2 US libraries, and about 500 individual STM publishers who for the last 13 or 14 years have been actually making our journals and e-books available to some 116 developing countries, of which some 78 the content is made available entirely free, and one of those countries is Kenya. The guy in the university would have had access to Nature through Research for Life, and we are always a little bit concerned we don't have massive resources for outreach, but we do regularly communicate with these institutions in these countries about the availability of this content. Some 15,000 journals, some 33,000 online books, as I say, including Nature, The Lancet, all the big ones. Researchforlife.org is the website, so if at any stage you find yourself having any kind of communication with these people, if nothing else, refer them to that URL and they can perhaps take advantage of some of this largesse. And the 4 in Research for Life is a figure 4. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just comment on that. It is a curious disconnect. These are professors who've been in the field for 20, 30 years, and both in the biomedical sciences. And I'll ask them, why is the message not getting through about this service? Is there some very complicated sign-up procedure? From their perspective, they do go to the library. The library doesn't subscribe, doesn't have access. It's worth asking the question: what's going on from a marketing perspective that these people are not aware of this?
Yeah, it's an interesting question actually, and there's a lot of issues of communication trails and things. I think we've done an amount of research ourselves as to sort of why usage of these services is not quite so great. We don't always find that the resources in the library are as ideal as they might be. There'll be universities where there's one computer and the librarian is very jealous of access to that computer, and there's a feeling that sharing information of the sort that would allow individual researchers to have that unmediated access isn't always what's going to happen. But as I say, I'm just here to yet again mention that the service does exist. There is a sign-up procedure, obviously. I wouldn't care to comment on how tricky it is, but it's an online form. I don't think it runs to more than a page, but I would certainly encourage anybody who has any contact with these people to at least go to the website and think, is it worth 20 minutes of my time in order to be able to access all this content, or in order to be able to give access to my patrons to this content?
Yeah, I mean, you might have hit the nail on the head. If it's really a case of one computer in a library, and the library doesn't support VPN access to people's laptops, then you've got a bottleneck there.
Hi, I'm Fred Dillow, American Institute of Physics. I want to thank all 4 of you for a very timely session. You saw from Mark's curves of the growth, particularly of Richard's network and Reese's profile, ResearchGate. These are very active platforms. And I've had the honor since last fall chairing the STM consultation on collaboration networks. And I urge you all to go to the STM website and read a draft set of principles for how the entire community, publishers, authors, readers, network owners, could work together to continue to make these very useful tools. You heard from a researcher that these are valuable, they're being used. And these are our customers. So we have a lot of incentive to work together to make these things useful, at the same time not hurt the primary content providers that are providing the content that are being shared on these networks. We put this commentary up early in February with a request for a wide consultation from anybody, and we got 50 really good comments. Go and read them. They're quite good. And the working group met all yesterday to analyze those comments, and we'll be putting up some summary of that over the next month. And we're continuing to work on our joint behalf, all of us. So please go to the STM website and take a look at it. And thank you for a very timely session.
And I'd agree with that. I read through most of those comments myself, and they're well worth your time to get a complete view of the issue.
Thanks, Jane Marks, Walters Kluwer, and on the STM board. I just wanted to stand up and thank Richard, give you a shout out to come along and actually talk to us today. I think it can't be easy running a network like this that some publishers, I think, feel concerned about, and actually to come and address us and tell us what you're doing. I think we really want to engage with you and find out how we can support the research community and what they need to do, but obviously also protect our rights holders at the same time. This is a question that you may want to duck, you may not want to answer, but do you have any idea how we could reach out to ResearchGate, who so far seem unwilling to talk to us, in the way that you've been more than willing to engage with us?
I don't have any good ideas on that, I'm afraid. I don't really stay in close touch with them at all. So I'm afraid I don't have an in.
Hi, Denny O'Clair from Outsell. I wonder, I haven't heard anybody mention anything about the new RG format that was launched, I think, last week. Has anybody seen that and looked at it, and any opinions on it?
I mean, it's one of many, and I think Reese kind of, in a way, nailed things when he said that the functionality of the platforms is actively developed, and in many areas surpasses individual platforms.
No, I mean it's a new function that they have called RG format.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I didn't understand. It sort of feeds into the social aspect, but it also mimics the more collaborative and discussion part of academia. So,
Well, it's nice.
Quick question or comment about the Alexa rating on ResearchGate. I've also been following it for the past year or so, and their Alexa rating is pretty much through the roof. But also their bounce rate is pretty high for any type of website. It's about 60%. Do you think that's based upon their email campaigns that are kind of spammy? Or what do you think? Why do you think people are coming in and then jumping out right away?
I think in general, when you talk about that sort of user, when you talk about someone with a very, contributing to a very high bounce rate, if I Google a paper and I, don't have credentials or whatever it may be at the given time, I'm not really going to care what the top hit is on the list. If it has a .pdf at the end of it, that's what's going to get clicked. And based on the way Google favors high traffic sites, that's going to be pretty high on the list if it's available on ResearchGate. And I would guess that most people that have clicked on my profile don't know me from Adam, but I happened to have the paper that they were looking for.
No? Oh, okay. Laura Fedora from Wiley. Piggybacking a bit on Denny's question about RGF, I think, is the acronym for ResearchGate format. And this is for Richard. I've been reading a little bit about your academia's acquisition of Plasmid and the work that you're doing on a peer review product. I was wondering if you could comment a bit about that, any comparisons between RGF or open evaluation, which PLOS has been piloting or has been in beta for PLOS for the past year, I think. There are other types of commenting post-publication peer review platforms that might be comparable to what you're doing or maybe very different.
So you saw our product sessions.
Yes.
That is our approach to discussion. And it's in limited beta. We're tweaking it and iterating it and trying to get the social model correct. Getting academics to discuss online has been notoriously difficult. And there's a graveyard of companies who've tried it. It's definitely not as simple as put a comment box on a paper and expect comments to flow in. Many sites have tried that very simplistic approach, and it's not an approach that academics have warmed to. We designed our sessions product with a very specific thesis in mind, trying to replicate the social model of a Q&A session. And in the beta, it's doing quite well.
Do you see sessions as perhaps facilitate, like that, the private function that sessions allow researchers to, or private protection, I guess, as an avenue to then build out a public-facing commenting function?
I think public commenting is where you find all the companies in the graveyard. I think that's one of the biggest problems. Is people have just thought that you should do public commenting, and just no one wants to do that.
Right.
It's not impossible that someone will develop a clever model to enable public commenting, but no one has managed to so far. It's just a very unusual thing to do, actually, from a social perspective.
Thank you.
Hi, Nico Gontrop, Digital Science. Mark, I just wanted to point out that you mentioned ReadCube as a DRM approach, and that was something when we did the Nature content sharing initiative to which you referred.
Yeah.
That was I just have to come and correct that because it was a perception that we were battling with some particularly vociferous members of the OA community. It's not like cryptographically encrypted. It's just that it's a read-only document, but it's fully indexable by Google. It's searchable. It's just the only thing is it's on the Nature webpage, but it's not locked like an MP4 on iTunes, for example. And the reason that I'm mentioning that is not just to clear up a perception about ReadCube, but it's an example of an avenue to public sharing of full-text papers that could be managed and involve exchange of usage data and that type of thing, whether it be on the publisher's website or via something like academia, which, when you look at the use case and all the utility it brings, it has a lot of potential. So, not a lot of questions, a lot of people making statements. Sorry to add to that. I should have had a question.
Bernie Rouse, ACM. I was wondering whether the title of this was scientific collaboration platforms. And from what I was hearing, it sounds like there's a lot of content sharing and tracking of usage and trying to assess impact. But the features that seem to be actual collaboration, the discussion forums, seem to have gotten the lowest usage of anything that's available on the platform. So I was just wondering whether you have comments on whether these are actually collaboration platforms.
I'll just say a couple of words on that. One is that a lot of the collaboration happens outside the network. So, you find a user on academia and then, in the cases I identified, he got invited to be in a movie as one of the prominent interviewees, and then in the other case, National Geographic did a documentary, and all that interaction was done through email or messaging. So that's one aspect of collaboration. Obviously, citations is a kind of collaboration in a sense, and co-authorship is a kind of collaboration that happens via, the mechanics of that are done over email. But the question of discussion, which you touched on, is precisely the hard problem. It's a very hard problem, and we're trying to tackle it.
I think there are. I think I didn't look very much at the way Mendeley was being used. And I think a word like collaboration covers a whole range of activities, and most meaningful collaboration takes place with people that we've met physically, face to face. At a previous session of this kind, talking about its platforms, another researcher was talking about discovering peers as sort of one of the functions or potential collaborators. But she said you'd never actually collaborate with someone you discovered through a platform until you met them at a conference, for instance, or if you're going to share data. Conferences is one of the venues you might do that, where there's a sort of a genuine interaction, but not through your computer screen. So tools that can help existing work groups simply be more efficient, I think, in the way that Reese was mentioning, managing big collections of sort of input data, just coordinating teams. I think those offer a lot of fairly or relatively easy scope compared to the sort of the open discussion thing where in a way you don't really know who you're talking to unless you've actually met them. So I would focus on that, that existing collaborative group that have formed in real life, and saying how can you make those people more efficient if I were developing tools for a network.
I would echo that collaboration's a really broad umbrella. So to pin it down with one specific function within any of these is going to be difficult. And within a lab, I think you'd be pretty disappointed to witness what scientists might view as collaboration. There are certainly people that I've worked on projects with that I've sent them something that I've written or an analysis that I've done, and they've taken it and done what they want to do, and that alone is a collaboration in some sense. Skill sets don't always overlap, and there are certain things that I produce or that people produce for me that are just viewed as a black box. Like, this is an answer, and I will use it as a means to an end. And you have this toy, and you can play with it and give me my answer. I have no desire to play with that toy.
Hi, my name is John Linton with AIP Publishing. I have one question in 3 parts, but I promise it's really not very prolonged. First part is, I guess, it's mostly for the folks who were speaking about academia.edu. The first sub-question is, what percentage of the registered users on academia.edu are actually in the STM realm? Is it 100%, or is it just a portion?
Oh, you want to do these? Okay.
Discipline. Yeah, sorry.
One by one?
One by one, yeah.
Okay, so breakdown by field, 40% in the so-called hard sciences, 40% in the social sciences, and 20% in the humanities.
Okay. And in the hard sciences, what's the regional breakout of registered users?
It's very global. United States is the biggest. Europe is second. As you saw from just my personal analytics, it's a very global source of traffic.
Okay. And the final part of the question is, within the major regions that you can break out, based on user behavior on the site, do the primary use cases that come up to the top, do they vary greatly by region, or are they pretty consistent across all the regions?
Yeah, it's very consistent. It's very similar. I mean, there might be some differences, obviously, if you're in Africa. Open access is a much bigger use case for accessing the site. But for an academic, getting exposure for your research and seeing what your colleagues are publishing is the primary use case.
Okay, thanks.
Can I ask a question? Can I ask you a question, Richard? Just following up on those, if you like, the sort of demographics of your users. I know it's notoriously hard to count the number of active researchers in the world. UNESCO's estimates are something like 8 or 9 million. And I know you've published a sort of a blog post a few years back where you reached an estimate of about 16 or 17 million.
17, yeah.
17 million. So you're currently 20 million, and the curve is still going like that. So has this exposed the size of the error in those other estimates, or are there is there a large or is there a fraction of non-active researchers in the community, or do you not know?
We do have as our mission to open up access to research to everyone in the world, and the dream for our company is that there are over 50 million papers ever published, and it would be a very nice outcome if the 3 billion people on the planet who have access to the internet can have access to all those research papers, and soon to be 6 billion people with access to the internet. The educational opportunities about having access to the original research is just unbelievable. Who knows what will come from them, but that's a dream. So it is true that we encourage all kinds of people to sign up, anyone who wants to download research and follow research. I think that, so there is a fraction of our user base that represents, as it were, Mabel from Ohio, someone who's just an interested party.
But you don't have a sense of how big that fraction is?
Yeah, we don't have good hard numbers. I mean, it's definitely a minority.
So it doesn't look like we have any more questions from the audience, but I have one more question myself. I guess I'll direct this at Richard initially, and then the others could chime in if you have a contribution. So the pre-conference yesterday was focused upon scholarly societies and their needs, not only their journal publications, but their needs as entities. And one thing that has long been emphasized about societies is that they strive to channel engagement with their members. The term emotional engagement, in fact, was used yesterday. So I'm wondering if you have ever considered or explored partnering with societies to help them engage with their members more.
It's an interesting idea. I guess you could say that these modern social networks are a kind of modern society, modern way of grouping people. I haven't had those conversations, but I'd be glad to chat to people who run societies and understand the use case more.
All right, and with that, we'll close. I'd like to thank all of our panelists who both obviously put in a lot of effort into this work, and among the three of them, traveled many miles to get here. So thank you all for that.